Thank you, Ambassador Bodine, and thank you all for coming out on this morning. Having reached the midway point of this term, the Obama administration is now at a logical time to evaluate whether its effort in the Israeli-Palestinian mediation is starting to bear fruit, and as well as looking ahead for prospects for the future. The Obama administration inherited a difficult set of conditions in 2009. The Bush administration's effort to define the Israeli-Palestinian endgame up front in what is known as the Annapolis process had come up short. Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert faced corruption charges and was ultimately forced to resign during the final months of 2008, promising back-channel efforts with Palestinian President Abbas succeeded in narrowing territorial difference to little over 4%. But the process was not durable. It went up in smoke with Olmert's resignation and the Gaza war, which raged from late 2008 to just before the start of the Obama inauguration. As Obama entered office, a very different political landscape emerged between Israelis and Palestinians. A new Netanyahu government was formed in the February 2009 election. The new administration was not keen on picking up the Annapolis process where Olmert and Abbas had left off. Abbas, for his part, felt himself cornered. He did not trust Netanyahu, and he felt trapped by Obama's call for a complete settlement freeze in the spring of 2009. As Abbas has stated both in multiple public interviews and in a conversation which we had together in Ramallah this summer at his office, he had never insisted upon a freeze in the past, being a precondition for talks during the previous negotiations with Olmert. Nor had Arafat made this a precondition in negotiations with Rabin and Barak. In several interviews over the last year, Abbas has blamed the United States for instilling a settlement freeze as its own precondition, although to be fair to the Obama administration, it never actually called it a precondition. Abbas feels Obama, in his words, got him up, quote, up a tree, end quote, without a ladder, quote unquote. He said he could not be outflanked. He made clear he could not be outflanked to appear to be less pro-Palestinian than President Obama. While the U.S. was correct in pinpointing settlements as a major irritant that needed to be dealt with, setting the bar high as of a complete freeze led the opponents of the cause, led even the opponents of the settlements in Israel to be silent. There were no rallies in Israel saying, "Say yes to Obama," as existed during Mr. Jerejian's term when they said, yes, say yes to Baker. Once Netanyahu had already said at that moment that he was willing to not geographically expand settlements. This may seem to some of you to be splitting of hairs, but it turned out to be a huge distinction. The administration could have taken the post of no expansion of settlements, and I think we would have saved over a year. Had we taken this alternate position, the issue would have been diffused, and final status negotiations would not have been prejudged. Neither my colleague, Rob Malley, who I understand is a panelist in another one of your sessions, or myself are a huge fan of settlements. Yet I agree with what Malley told the New York Times on October 6th regarding the U.S. approach to settlements. Quote, "The original sin was putting so much emphasis on this, an issue we couldn't resolve." End quote. He added, "We spent the whole year trying to undo the damage of that step." End quote. Indeed, something odd would transpire. With the bar set so high, the Abbas government rejected the U.S.-endorsed settlement moratorium of November 2009 as falling short of what it truly needed. Yet by August 2010, what was insignificant the previous fall had suddenly become indispensable. So we have gone from the inconsequential to the indispensable. Abbas insisted that the settlement moratorium must continue. How did the inconsequential become indispensable? Moreover, 9 of the 10 months in which the moratorium was in place was utterly wasted. And I think if you speak to Palestinians privately, they will admit that. Moreover, the Arab states did not come through with their promise to match Israeli steps towards the Palestinians with steps of their own towards Israel. All this, in turn, was then utilized by Israelis as a reason not to extend the moratorium beyond September 2010, saying that the whole period had been wasted anyway. The 2009 to August 2010 period was an opportunity utterly lost. a loss magnified by the fact that developments on the ground in the West Bank were actually improving. Economic growth in the West Bank was 9% last year, according to the International Monetary Fund. This is at a time of a global recession. Parenthetically, and subject maybe for a Q&A, the economic assistance to the Palestinians, which have been prominent in the Obama administration, the U.S. is the biggest giver to the Palestinians, that could come under pressure now, I fear, with a Republican-led House. There were problems certainly on the Israeli side, too. Israel's Israeli Foreign Minister Avigdor Lieberman disparaged his own premier's peacemaking efforts, saying peace will not come this or next generation. By the way, the 1 month of the moratorium where the Palestinians agreed to direct talks, that was this past September, there lacked a bold focus on territory in those negotiations, which could have forced the Palestinians to put the moratorium issue in a wider context. I think Israel has to think about some soul-searching as well. So how to avoid further missed opportunities and ensure that the settlement issue no longer overshadows the issue of peace negotiations, or issues of symptom never overwhelm the issue of curing the problem. There would be a bitter irony if the current situation indeed continued. On one hand, Netanyahu has reached some degree of success with President Obama this summer. Having never paid Netanyahu any compliments in the past, Obama came out of the July 6th meeting at the Oval Office and said, "I think he wants peace. I think he's willing to take risks for peace." End quote. Having reversed course and endorsed the two-state solution in a policy speech in June 2009, Netanyahu apparently confided in Obama about his specific endpoint in reaching a two-state solution. The fact that he wants to hold peace talks directly with Abbas could be a sign of seriousness that he does not want the talks ensnarled in mid-level foot-dragging. While Netanyahu may have successfully shared an objective with the U.S. and the Palestinians, he has not demonstrated a strategy to overcome his domestic constraints and reach the ultimate objective. Herein lies the Netanyahu paradox. On one hand, Netanyahu fears a premature fracturing of the Israeli right, whereby Lieberman will attack any preliminary concessions and forcing Netanyahu, in his view, to lose his electoral base. To this end, Netanyahu hopes to conduct negotiations in such an intimate setting with Abbas that he will be forced to make decisions only at the final moment, culminating in one big decision point. Until then, he seeks to preserve his political capital and his coalition. Yet this could be at the expense of Abbas, and this presumes that it requires that the Middle East operates under laboratory-like conditions with hermetically sealed rooms and a friction-free period during the entire duration of the peace talks. Yet, the Middle East does not operate under laboratory conditions, and therefore one may never reach a point where the political capital can finally be spent. The paradox of Netanyahu's approach of making one massive decision at the end and avoiding all decisions along the way is that it could invite the very outcome he seeks to avoid, which is an Obama peace plan. For if the U.S. is convinced the parties will not be able to reach a decision due to the political wear and tear they will experience along the way, Obama may be prompted to put forward a plan for the peace talks in order to force that very big decision. Indeed, traditionally, U.S. plans work best in either two scenarios, either as a bridge over a river, not over an ocean, like the Clinton parameters of December 2000, or as a walkaway strategy for the U.S., hoping to stir public debate in each society. Those who favor an Obama plan want a third outcome, viewing it as a potential lever here and now, an instrument for breakthrough. Yet, as we know, this is uncertain. It seems the main way, and I'd like to say in the final point, that the main way to avoid this go-for-broke U.S. approach is to ensure that the Netanyahu government is broadened to include the Kadima party, which has a critical 28 seats in the 120-member Knesset. With a broadened government, there will be sturdy support for a strategy to reach a two-state solution. Whether it is a policy of the U.S.-led approach or the politics of a broadened government in Israel, these are the two possible policy options for the coming year. It's clear that if there is no broadened government, I think that the prospects of an Obama peace plan shoot way up. Even under the best of circumstances, it will be difficult for both peoples to solve all the differences. There have been little conditioning of the societal landscape of both societies in dealing with the two narrative issues of this conflict, Jerusalem and refugees. Both issues cut to the self-definition of the parties, given how intertwined the issues of religion and nationalism have become. Yet it is important to remember that the territorial differences between the parties were narrowed during the Olmert-Abbas negotiations, and these differences of 4% are indeed bridgeable. Indeed, I'd like to say this very day, today, marks the 15th anniversary of the killing of Yitzhak Rabin, the iconic ex-general who gave his life for peace. This month is also the 6th anniversary of the death of Yasser Arafat, who personified Palestinian nationalism. The tragedy of this conflict should not be allowed to continue for another generation, let alone a generation after that. Based on the twin pillars of dignity and security, we should not allow the past to bury the future any longer in the Middle East. Thank you all very much.